I'd like to call the September 23rd, 2024 Housing Authority regular meeting to order. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. As a matter of housekeeping, I'd like to remind commissioners to keep their microphones muted unless they are speaking. The City of Santa Rosa is committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment free from disruption. We will not tolerate any hateful speech or actions and are well staffed to monitor that everyone is participating respectfully, or they will be removed. If necessary, we will also immediately end the meeting. Clerk, please explain how public comments will be heard at today's meeting.
After each agenda item, the chair will ask the Housing Authority Commissioner for comments, and then we'll open the item for public comment. Once the chair calls for public comment, please go to the closest podium in the upper tier of the chambers. The clerk will unmute your microphone and start the timer. Speakers will be allowed to speak one time per item up to 3 minutes. Additionally, under item number 7, there is one public comment period to speak on non-agenda items. This is the time when any person may address the Housing Authority on matters not listed on this agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Housing Authority.
Thank you. Item 2, remote participation under AB 2449. No one is participating remotely today. Item 3, roll call. Before I ask the clerk to do a roll call for attendance to assist with streaming the meeting and capturing commissioners as they are speaking, I want to continue to remind commissioners to please ask the chair to be recognized before asking a question or making a comment. This will allow time for the cameras to shift to a new speaker. Clerk, please call the roll.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman? Absent. Commissioner Owen?
Here.
Commissioner Conti?
Here.
Vice Chair Downey is absent. And then Chair Newton.
Here.
So let the record reflect that all commissioners are present with the exception of Chair Downey, or Vice Chair Downey, and Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you. Item 4, statements of abstention. Any commissioners have any statements of abstention today? All right, seeing none. Item 5, staff briefing. Item 5.1, staff briefing. I think Kate.
Good afternoon, Chair Newton and Housing Authority Commissioners. I am Kate Goldfein, Administrative Services Officer for the Housing and Community Services Department. I'm presenting the unaudited final Housing Authority expenditures for the prior fiscal year 23-24. And I want to make sure you know the audited financial statements are prepared by the city's accounting division, and with assistance from us and our auditors. Those are generally complete in January, and it's called the acronym is the HAFR. It's the Housing Authority Annual Financial Report, available on the Finance Department website. So these are unaudited, not final. So let's start with expenditures. The authority came in at or under budget in all categories. In administration and overhead, our expenses were a little under $6.1 million, and we came in under budget primarily due to vacancies in the Rental Housing Assistance Division, and we did not expend our full admin allowance from HUD for services and supplies in that division. In subrecipient funding, we expended $578,000. We had remaining funding of just under $6,000. That was local funding that was budgeted potentially to cover current homeless services programs due to what we're seeing is slight reduction in CDBG public services funding each year. The local funding was not needed. It'll go back into reserves and it will be used next year. In loan activity, we expended well over 10 million, making progress on many of the projects listed in the pipeline and detailed in this memo. Please note, I did find a typo in the memo at the very bottom of the first page. The last sentence, it says commitments of 4.5 million, but as you can see from the chart, our commitments are just under 4.1 million for Laurel Phase 3, Parkwood, Stony Point Flats, and Caritas Phase 2. And the 443,000 remaining is primarily home funds, and then there are some state Cal Home funds in that as well. Housing assistance payments, our biggest expense by far that we pay directly to Santa Rosa landlords. 33 million in expense. The table shows 6.1 million in unused funding, but I want to explain this. So this is primarily due to us having to fit HUD's federally funded program into the city and housing authority's budget process. So we budget annually, once a year, in February and March, with the best information we have at the time for a budget that goes into effect the following July. And we always budget to utilize 100% of our vouchers at an average monthly cost. But HUD never has and does not, and we don't have any plans to see them budget for us to be able to lease up at 100%. So we used 100% of the budget we received from HUD, and that gave us about 87% average utilization this year in the voucher program. So I want to make sure you guys know that we budget for 100%. It's kind of an aspirational goal. Should HUD receive a ton more funding from Congress and we are able to get those last people leased up in our program. So in CDBG-DR, the developments continue to make progress, 1.2 million expended and 6.9 million committed still to Burbank, Cannery, and Caritas Homes, Phase 1. And those projects are on the pipeline. Projects are mostly comprised of one-time state and federal funding. There is a small amount of ongoing funding in there. We have had a lot of one-time funding in the past 7 years due to our fire disaster and the pandemic, and that is now starting to ramp down as we have been telling you that it would. So moving to funding sources, I'm going to focus on the highlights and then I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So the best news is housing impact fees budgeted at 1.6 million, but came in at 1.9 million. So I looked at about the past 5 years of this funding, and 1.9 million is about average for us. We had 1 year at 3 million, we had 1 year at 2.3 million, but literally 3 out of the last 5 years, we have received 1.9 million of this funding source. And we are continuing to monitor this carefully. In compliance monitoring fees, we budgeted at 182,000. We came in over budget at 237,000. The main source was notice of funding availability fees and loan document preparation fees, which are paid to us for our staff to process those. Loan repayments also came in over budget, which is great, at 629,000. That's received across all of our different funds, state, local, and federal. And all of that revenue goes into reserves and will be used for loans or admin next fiscal year. And then finally, in the category other, had a large percent increase, so I just wanted to explain that. So that's primarily made up of interest in the housing authority funds based on their share of the city's bank account. So the city has their bank account, and then internally we're tracking where all that money is in each fund. And those fluctuate year to year, so I don't count on that revenue, but it does go into reserves and will be used for loans or admin next fiscal year. So that concludes the briefing, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Kate. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Smith.
Can you just go over on the state grants? We got 22.4 million, we received 2.5, and there's a variance. I'm not following you totally. If you can just review that, that would be great.
Sure. So the state grant is primarily the infill infrastructure grant, and we've been in front of you a few times with that. That's a grant that we applied for as a city, and some of the funding is going towards a city park and improvements. Some of it is going towards affordable housing, and I believe some of it is going towards market rate housing. And the way that those work is the developer expends the funds, we pay back the developer, and then we request a reimbursement from the granting agency. So that is the reimbursement that we've received thus far, or that we received in that fiscal year. So we're getting all that money. That money's like committed to us, but what we've actually, what the developers expended and what we've requested for reimbursement is the actual amount. So the rest of that money is ours. We just haven't had the developer spend it and us request reimbursement yet. Yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Owen?
Thank you for the report. So if I'm looking at housing assistance payments, so you went over the $6 million remaining. So does that mean that we received $32 million from HUD? Okay, and how many vouchers, and that's all voucher money?
That's entirely voucher money for our 3 voucher programs, which the big one is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, where we have, I believe, 1,925 vouchers. We're leasing up just under 1,700 of that. We have the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. That's 131 vouchers. I believe we lease up around 112. And then we also have tenant-based rental assistance, which is funded by the home funding source, and that is just paid out of our entitlement grant. But the Housing Choice Vouchers are by far the biggest source of housing assistance payments, and that's all they are.
So the Housing Choice is 1975, is that
25.
project? Yeah, I'm sorry?
1925.
I'm sorry. Is that project-based in that number?
Yes.
Okay. And then what is the average monthly per voucher?
Yeah, give me one sec. So across all programs, it averaged $1,268 per month. We budgeted at $1,325, so we're doing our best to look forward to budget for 12 months out for a budget that starts 4 months later. So we're trying to basically budget 16 months out at the beginning of each year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you track that 1268 as it refers to studio units, 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units? I mean, how many?
So we do have that data. There are different payment standards for each of those size of units. And though, when we are getting clients or we are taking clients off the waiting list, we are taking the next client regardless of their unit size.
Okay. All right. And then that's going to open up 2025?
Oh, the waiting list?
Yeah.
Our past practice has been to open up in the odd years, and then we use even years like this summer to refresh our waiting list. So to make sure that the people who are still on our waiting list are still interested or in need of assistance. So yes, currently the plan is to reopen the waiting list in 2025.
And it's still about a 7-year wait list?
That's what we're averaging, yes.
Okay.
And then if I could just follow up on one of the programs that Kate mentioned. For the emergency housing vouchers, the city was awarded 131 emergency housing vouchers. That program does have kind of a sunset period, and as participants end their participation through a variety of reasons, those vouchers are not renewed. So it's a diminishing program, so the individuals that are on there will continue to be served, but as their participation ends, we lose that voucher, and that is a nationwide practice.
So those on the emergency voucher aren't kicked off if they still need it, is that
No,
correct? Okay.
no.
Okay, and they don't, because if they were, I was going to ask if they are a priority for the other voucher program, so that's not an issue.
Correct.
If we can skip over to the housing impact fees, and this kind of dovetails into something we're talking about later. Do you have information as to how many units that is that were, so if an impact fee was paid for single family or for multifamily, how many units does that represent? And if it's for commercial, because commercial also pays that fee, how many square feet was that? And here's a question for the commercial side. Is that new construction only, or is it tenant improvements, new leases, or is it just new construction that pays that fee?
So I don't have that information. Our Planning and Economic Development Department would, and I can ask them for it. So the unit mix of what went into impact fees.
Right, because if you can look at the impact fees that were paid, how many units that represents, and then how does that track to RENA numbers?
Okay, and then for the commercial linkage fee, that is new construction.
Only
and-
new construction?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that was really low this year, like a couple $1,000s.
There's not much going on in new commercial construction in the city. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions from commissioners? A couple questions. Going back to the vouchers. So you talked about budgeting for 19,250, but only leasing up somewhere around 17,000. Is that difference because of the lack of funds from HUD to where you said we do 100% and they generally do about 80% actually comes through?
Correct. So it's a balancing. We have the annual budget that we're awarded by HUD, and then we have the maximum number of vouchers. So our cap is 1,925. And again, this is applied nationwide to housing authorities. So we have to balance our budget with the number of vouchers, never exceeding either of those amounts.
Yeah. How many vouchers is that about? I didn't do the math based on, if you allocate, would you say 1,600 per voucher, I guess, that difference, how many people are we talking about? How many?
So our per month average was $1,268.
Yeah.
I think I would need to do a little more math behind the scenes
Yeah,
to get
that's fine.
what you're asking for, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sticking with the vouchers, there was one here that talks about the VASH, veteran vouchers with the 10K remaining there. So what does that mean? Does that mean there's $10,000 left that didn't go to vouchers for veterans that could have been used, or what does that 10K mean?
So that's a project that's from like maybe 10 or 15 years ago now, that was administrative funding that we get from HUD, that when the voucher program was ramping up and was really hot and heavy, we had additional administrative funding that we put into a project key to be able to pay first month security deposit. Thank you. I could not think of that word. To pay security deposits for veterans to be able to get into housing.
Okay.
So we just have about 10,000 of that left, and we are getting much fewer requests for that now.
Much fewer requests for the VASH?
Security deposits, yeah. No, we're still leasing up VASH as soon as we can.
Oh, for
but
security deposits
The security
specifically.
deposit help.
Okay. You guys talked about the infill stuff, and when you say the remainder is designated for specific market rate and affordable housing development projects, so those projects have already been identified, and folks are already spending money. We're just going through the process of getting them reimbursed, going back through that chain.
Yeah, so the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, known as IIG, the city was awarded 2 rounds of grants. And so the first round we are working on is from 2021, I believe. And that included 6 housing projects and then a turn pocket in front of the mall. So the one project that we are currently administering funds, and that's where you see the spend down, is for the cannery at Railroad Square, which is also a project that the Housing Authority supported with CDBG-DR and project-based vouchers. So those are the IIG funds that have been drawn down so far, and we've been reimbursed by the state. The next one that I anticipate drawing down the funds is also a project supported by the Housing Authority, Caritas Homes, which is working on their permanent conversion. So those look to have those funds come in as they take out their construction loan. And then the rest of the grant had some market rate projects that are in various stages of pre-development. And then as we look to the 2022 grant, I think it was much smaller, about 9 million. And there are a couple of affordable housing projects and then improvements to MLK Park, which will be administered by the city's Parks Department.
Okay.
And again, those, like Kate said, those are all based on reimbursement.
Right, okay, so there are specific market rate development projects. You guys are aware, we haven't seen them just because they're not affordable, but.
Correct,
Yeah.
and those were included in the grant applications at the time.
Okay.
We applied to HCD because it's all calculated based on the level of affordability and bedroom size of those units. So it's a very specific
Okay.
unit mix and count that goes into those awards.
And just, I know we talked about it before, but you talked about the commercial linkage fee, which is new commercial development. Can you explain the, I guess it's fees in lieu of affordable units, that line in there, and just remind me, is that a market, is there some sort of rule where everything needs to have some, go ahead.
Correct.
You know what,
Yeah, so
you know what
this-
I'm asking.
So the city has a housing in lieu fee ordinance, and that gives developers the option to do a variety of things when they are proposing a new development. They can provide units on site, they can pay a fee, or there's also various means of alternative compliance. What we see frequently is payment of the fee, which would then go into the housing authority's financial resources, and we put out through a NOFA. So
Okay.
the in lieu fees are one of the primary mechanisms that we use to fund affordable housing projects.
This is for any residential development in the city, even if it's designed to be market rate, you would have to pay the fee in lieu of affordable units or provide some percentage of affordable units?
So affordable housing, if it's a strict affordable housing project that has a regulatory agreement that's administered by staff, then you do not need to pay the fee because
Right.
you're already providing the service that we're looking for. But if you're a market rate project, then yes, you either need to pay the fee, identify on-site units, or propose a method of alternative compliance that's accepted by the
Okay.
city.
What sort of percentage would that be if you were going to do a market rate development?
Man, you're digging deep. Oh,
Sorry.
So it's relatively complicated. I want to say off the top of my head that it depends on if it's rental or for sale. I think it's about 8% on site, and then
Okay.
if you're downtown, it's even less. And that reduction was made to help spur downtown development.
Okay, all right. No, that's great info. I really appreciate it. One more on the real property transfer tax. So it says here the city funded homeless services with ARPA this year. And so we got all the RPTT. That's probably, is that a one-time thing? Can we expect less RPTT next year because of that?
Yeah, so with the budget that you approved that started this July 1st, about 3 months ago, the RPTT was about a little less than half of that because the city is out of ARPA funding
Yeah.
for most of homeless services, and now it's split again between the two programs.
Okay. All right, thanks. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Smith?
Just a review again on the loan payments that came in, substantially more. Do you expect that to continue?
Every year is different. So we budget that really conservatively because we utilize those funds for loans for new development in the following year. So I can't say that I expect that to continue. It's something that is based on the cash flows of each project that we have funded. And I just want to be conservative with it because that money is, if we do get more money, great, it goes into the next year's NOFA.
Commissioner Friedman?
Thank you. I'm wondering, you mentioned that there was $10,000 still left for the security deposits to help veterans and veteran families get into housing. I'm wondering how that works in that, is that if a veteran or veteran family uses some of that money for security deposit, is it a gift or is it a loan that they pay back and then it's like a revolving fund for future veterans?
Yeah, thank you. We haven't had expenditure in that in several years, but my understanding of that is that if there is any of the security deposit return, actually, I remember this. We have had a small amount of security deposits returned. So if we pay, I think we paid like 1,200 towards a security deposit in the last few years, and we got 900 back. So it is kind of a revolving program, but we're not getting a lot back from it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right, I'd like to open public comment on item 5.1.
We are now taking public comments on item 5.1. If you wish to make comment, please go to one of the podiums in the upper tier of the chambers. You will have 3 minutes, and the countdown time will alert you at the end of the period. Please state your name for the record if you so choose.
The in lieu fees, and it was first broached almost 30 years ago, I believe, by the Sonoma County Housing Advocacy Group, that in lieu fees are not nearly enough for what needs to be done in the future. That was then, this is now, it's still the same situation. One would hope that you would go for inclusionary housing, and you'd find a way to make sure and try to get not just 10 or 15%, but 20% of new market rate developments actually having in that project inclusionary affordable housing. That way it gets built. For decades, what's been happening is the for market rate developers have avoided really trying to get in affordable housing. There used to be a mix of duplexes and triplexes, fourplexes. There used to be a lot of different types of housing that get built. This hasn't been happening to the detriment. And one of the things to keep in mind, it's almost as if the city of Santa Rosa has been diminishing the stock of affordable housing. And I'll talk about that later during public comment. But you folks get to be the keepers of the key, if you will. And I hope you'll be talking to the city manager and the city council about ways in which we'll be using funding in the future, with the decreasing ARPA money being a key component to what was happening the last few years. What is the plan in the next few years in the future? Real estate property transfer tax, we don't know if that's going to be picking up. So thank you again. If you could answer that question on what Burbank Avenue Apartments is actually getting, because that project was rushed in on us. I live down the road from Burbank, and people hadn't want that project to go forward. And then all of a sudden the developer said, well, I'm going to put in 60 units of affordable apartments. So please explain what's happening. We didn't get that when it was done at Bellevue Ranch that way. They said 64 units of affordable apartments were going to be built. They weren't built by the developer. It came back to the housing authority, who then chose Burbank Housing to build them with the public's money. And that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. The developer was supposed to pick up those costs on 64 units. So I hope that's the same thing happening at Burbank Avenue Apartments, that the developer picks up that cost on those apartments. Thank you.
Does anybody want to speak to the typo, or if it's a typo or not?
It is a typo. We apologize. That should be 2.6 million, so there is a missing M. Million.
With an M? Million?
Million with an M,
okay,
yes.
yeah,
And this
billion
is,
would be Yeah.
Something.
I don't think we're there yet.
This is a project that has actually come before the Housing Authority on numerous occasions to award project-based vouchers, to make awards of local funds, and then also CDBG DR.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other public comment?
It doesn't appear we have any more public comment.
All right, item 5.2, regional housing needs allocation.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Newton and members of the Housing Authority. Following a request at last month's meeting, I'm going to provide an overview of the regional housing needs allocation. So clerk, if you could pull up the presentation, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm going to provide you with an overview of our current regional housing needs allocation known as RHNA. So our current cycle is from 2023 to 2031. So to provide you with some history on RHNA, it was created in 1969 in an effort to require jurisdictions to provide for their share of affordable housing needs, or needs of housing at all income levels. Santa Rosa is located within the Association of Bay Area Governments, known as ABAG, and they are responsible for administering the methodology that attributes the units to the various jurisdictions within the 9 Bay Area counties. And as we get into more of the slides, you'll see that affordability is split into 4 different levels that we have to report on to the state on an annual basis, and that's how our RHNA goals are established and how we demonstrate what we've achieved thus far. And so the role of the City of Santa Rosa, and then what trickles down to the Housing Authority, is to participate in the allocation process and then provide updates to the state through the housing element, and then the annual reporting associated with that. So for our current RHNA cycle, the Bay Area, and again, this is going back to ABAG's pool of resources that they are allocating out, it's a total of 441 units, 176. And so you can see it's very low income, moderate, and above moderate. And again, very low is 50% and less. Low is generally 60 to 80, moderate is 80 to 120, and then above moderate is anything that is occupied by an individual or household that is in excess of 120% of the area median income. And so just to provide some context, what I've done is shown you what's allocated to Sonoma County, and then you can see how Santa Rosa, and we have additional slides that will touch on Santa Rosa, how this goes to each jurisdiction. So countywide, we have 14,562 of those 441 units that we looked at on the previous slide. And Santa Rosa, which is roughly in the middle of this slide, you can see has the largest allocation with a total of 4,685 units broken amongst the 4 income levels. Some of this can be roughly attributed to population, so you'll see that some of the smaller cities throughout the county have much lower allocations. When you're looking at Sebastopol or Sonoma, the numbers are quite low. Next slide, please. And then for Santa Rosa, what we're looking at in this current cycle is a total of 4,685 units. For very low, that's 1,218. Low is 701. Our moderate, 771, and then above moderate is 1,995. So to help kind of establish where we've been in the past, pulled up our previous cycle, and this is based on reports that the city, and mainly it's our Planning and Economic Development Department, they compile the information based on building permits, because everything we report to the state is based on those building permits that were issued during that calendar year. And so we cross-reference that with the information that we have on projects, commitments the Housing Authority has made, units that may have entered into affordable housing contracts. So if a developer was going to provide on-site units, we would get credit as long as it's contractual for those units. So as you can see in our previous cycle, we had 4,600, I'm sorry, wait, this is the same, is this? This is this current cycle. I got ahead of myself. So as you can see, for the 4,685 units, we have issued a total of 1,700 units, and the remaining need for the remainder of the cycle is 2,357. So that's what we're going to be looking at addressing in the upcoming years is what can we do to make some progress on the 2,357 units. This is where I thought I was. So in our previous cycle, we had an allocation of 5,083 units. You can see in the column, the second from the right, a total of 4,861 permits were issued during that RENA cycle, and we had a remaining balance of 1,041. So overall, I think we made good progress in achieving the RENA goals. I can't think of a cycle where we did in fact achieve them because they are fairly robust. I think as Housing Authority Commissioners, you know it takes a fair amount of resources to assist affordable housing units. We're usually looking at assistance of about $100,000 a unit in our affordable housing developments. So when you extrapolate that into the total allocation, it is a significant amount of resources. What I think helped us be fairly successful in this past cycle is we had a one-time influx of money as a result of the 2017 fires. So because of that $38.5 million that came to us through HCD, which was also coupled with tax credits to assist with disaster recovery, and that provided financial assistance to other projects in the area, we were able to make significant progress. So that is a brief overview of RENA, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we can go back to the slides if you have specific questions.
All right, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Smith.
You kind of give me a quick overview how tax credits work that help the developers get money to build. I'm not totally sure. You know, cash is easy, but I'm not sure on the tax credits.
So tax credits are issued by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. It's a competitive process, and the developers need to provide affordability in the project. And then based on that competitive process, they are essentially awarded these credits which someone buys. So it's a financing tool. As a result of that tool, they provide income restricted projects. We often see developments that we're providing, the housing authorities providing financial assistance to, also receiving tax credits. So there's a lot of overlap between the funding sources. But in the case of the disaster recovery tax credits, because there was such significant resources coming to Sonoma County, we have some projects that just received tax credits and didn't receive assistance from the housing authority.
Commissioner Owen.
This is a very hot topic around the Bay Area in terms of what needs to get built and what. So let me see if I can go back and forth and make sure that we have the right perception in the marketplace right now. So 2015 to 2023, City of Santa Rosa was required per RENA to have 5,083 units,
Correct.
of which 4,861 were built. So I'm going to the prior cycle. This cycle, again, 8 years, is down. The requirement has gone from 5,083 to 4,685. Is that correct?
Correct. And briefly touch on that is as part of the methodology process, there is coordination with ABAG and the local jurisdictions as they were developing the methodology for this current cycle, looking at some of the impacts in our area, which included a greater focus on high fire severity zones. So taking into account some of our natural disaster aspects helped lower the number.
Because we were replenishing what had been burned, so the activity was actually greater than because we weren't creating new units, we were replacing units?
No, just looking at where we could provide additional units as well,
Okay.
because a requirement of the state and through our RENA numbers is that in the housing element, which is a separate report included in the general plan that's provided to the state, is identifying locations for these units. So in the housing element, all cities and counties need to identify where they would plan to put all of these units.
Okay.
And so incorporating those geographic limitations is part of the process.
So everything like urban growth boundaries and such, which limit buildable land, will adjust to RENA numbers?
It can adjust it, or it can be a compelling reason to work with the jurisdiction that's allocating the units to address a draft allocation.
Okay. And so if I look at, and to be counted as part of the RENA numbers, a building permit needs to be issued. Not that it's in planning, not that it's completed. To be counted, a building permit needs to be issued. Is that the criteria?
Yes, HCD is also looking at, they've expanded their reporting in recent years. So the city also does report on approvals that have been provided, but what makes it count is the issuance of a building permit. And then we also need to follow up in subsequent reports on building permits completed. So that helps assist with tracking kind of the progress through entitlements, permit issuance, and completion.
So if I look at last time, we had 4,861 permits issued on 8 years. That's about 607 units a year. And right now we have 1,700 issued. Is that just for 1 year? Because it says 22 and 23, but 22 would be the prior period.
It was a small portion of 22, and
Okay.
off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact
So
timeframe.
that's almost 3 times the average that we had. So the number of units being built in just this current year, because we've had a huge influx of units, mostly multifamily, very little single family, have been almost 3 times what the average was per year for the prior period. Is that a fair statement?
I would say, based on my observations around the city, that is a fair statement, and I think you can see that as you're driving around. We have a significant number of multifamily complexes of various income categories under construction currently.
And as we have looked at later in today's, you've got the development pipeline, and you can see how many units are under construction that count as affordable and have been completed in the last 24 months. There's been a huge influx, primarily to the DR fundings, both in terms of CDBG and 9% tax credits. Is that also a fair statement to make?
I'd say that's a fair statement, and then to also expand upon that, as we look at some of our fire-impacted sites, like the former Journey's End site, where we have 160 plus affordable housing units. On the northern end of that site, if you're driving by, you'll see there's a lot of site work being done, and it's going to be a couple hundred market rate units. So that one site is going from what was previously 160 plus mobile home units to in excess of 500 rental units.
Yeah, the density is going up substantially in the rebuild
Correct.
areas.
And then similarly at the opposite corner, the site of the old Fountain Grove Inn is now going to be a couple hundred apartment units as well. So we're also seeing a change in use. So what was a hotel is now going to be residential.
And the city's move to have city-centered growth, because that is within the city limits, is in fact occurring, because you can look at the Journey's End, you can look at the former Fountain Grove site, you can look at...
We have some sites here in downtown Santa Rosa.
Right. The one that, I forget who's
I think
building
it's
it.
420 Mendocino is.
That property, we've got the Freebird property that's gone up, that's been, the city's provided monies for. There's properties nearing completion on Kiwanis Springs and Santa Rosa Avenue, similar products, both receiving 9% DRs, so tax credits. So there has been a huge influx in terms of units now, but they've been primarily multifamily, very little single family. I just want to make sure that I'm reading these numbers right. So as detrimental as the fires were, and they absolutely were detrimental, there's been a huge influx in terms of the numbers of units that are being built now, because it takes a long time to get that money in place, get it approved, get it entitled, and get it financed and get it started.
Correct.
So, okay. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Thank you.
I knew it was going to be good when I saw the calculator out. Any other questions from staff? Yeah, I noticed that as well, that it seemed like we made really good progress just in the first year at the 17 units. I wanted to also better understand the relationship between the pipeline that we see and these numbers. Most of those have been permitted, because there's something like 2,000 if you just look at the bottom line of things that are units that are in that pipeline. Have those all been permitted, or?
It depends. And it's hard to kind of attribute them to,
Yeah.
Prior to the 2023 cycle. So if they're completed, then I'd say most likely they were in the previous cycle. If they're under construction, as long as they pulled their permit when this cycle started, then we're seeing them count. And then certainly those units that have not pulled their building permits yet, things that we're just going to see, things that may be responding to our NOFA or other projects that are coming online will be counted towards this cycle as long as they pull permits by 2031.
I see. Which, whatever's in that pipeline now, you would think would, well, I guess it's hard to say with any certainty who's going to pull a permit. I guess that's more my understanding of at what point in the process do they pull a permit that then counts towards this number here?
So we don't see projects pull their permits until they have all of their funding in place.
Okay.
And then that's, and certainly if they receive tax credits, and there's a timeline, a clock that they have that starts upon award in order for them to pull their permits and begin construction. So usually it's within 180 days of tax credit award to make sure that the projects are fully funded and then begin construction. But oftentimes projects come to the Housing Authority first for some of their pre-development funding. So we can see them sitting on our pipeline for a couple of years as they work to compete for the various financing sources.
Okay. And then not hitting the numbers, they're lofty goals, I guess, and on the last one, if we miss it by 1,000, what happens?
In the past, there have not been consequences for not meeting your goals. There has been talk at the state level that there will be consequences. I'm not sure what those would be. I think we certainly are making our best efforts to advance affordable housing as much as we can. A lot of these projects do rely on funding from the state through the Department of Housing and Community Development to help fill the funding gaps. So that is a component that is out of our control. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other questions from commissioners? All right, we'll open public comment on item 5.2. Oh. Okay. Is this the city attorney who wants to weigh in? Okay, go ahead.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I was just going to respond to your question. One of the key things that if you fail to meet the numbers that the state has been using to kind of encourage that is that on certain projects, it'll limit the city's discretion over those projects. They engage in certain kind of streamlining processes that would apply and limit the city council's discretion to deny projects if you haven't met those numbers. So, one of the ways that the state's been using to kind of encourage housing going forward is to limit kind of the regulatory discretion that the city council may have if those numbers aren't met. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you. Since we fell short in the last cycle, would we be subject to some of those streamlining provisions?
So in general, there are some streamlining laws that apply in the event that developers can take advantage of.
In Santa Rosa?
Yeah, until you've met those numbers, they're fairly limited, and as long as you have approved housing element, you're usually in good shape with those. But that's one of the measures that you would be looking at. It wouldn't matter for last cycle though. The fact that you missed them during last cycle, it's kind of a go forward issue.
I see. Okay. Appreciate that insight. Any other questions, comments on that? Okay. We'll open public comment on item 5.2.
We are now taking public comment on item 5.2. If you wish to make a comment, please go to one of the podiums in the upper tier of the chambers. You will have 3 minutes, and a countdown time will alert you at the end of that period. Please state your name for the record if you so choose.
I want to have you look at the last column, remaining need, and how, this is the page for 2015 to 2023, above moderate. There is no remaining need for above moderate housing, according to the RENA numbers. And historically, throughout the 30 short years I've been coming here to talk about different housing needs, there has never been a time when we did not meet the needs for above moderate. Above moderate income housing gets built all the time. The needs have been, first and foremost, always for very low, and now there's an extra category, which isn't actually called out here, called extremely low income. And housing authorities were set up like 60 years ago because there was a need for low income, affordable rental residential housing at that time. And historically, Santa Rosa and the cities in Sonoma County, including the county, have never met those needs. So here, from just looking at it, it says that it's only 33% that's needed for those folks in those lower categories right now. But it's actually more. And I really feel that one of the things that doesn't get discussed much is there's a stipulation in the way the government handles this, and it's their definition of what's affordable that they go by. So people who live in units and think, okay, that's all they can afford and they're glad to be there, that might not be counted by the city if they decide to, like, tear down a unit. They'll say, well, that wasn't an affordable unit, so we don't have to worry about that one. And these are very important things for you folks to talk about for the next cycle, because you won't have the ARPA money and you won't have the Tubbs Fire rebuild money. You'll be back to the same old kind of approach, the paradigm of the past, if you will, in which you'll be struggling to get enough units built for those folks who are extremely low income, very low income, but there'll always be developers providing for moderate and above moderate. I'm here to not just urge you, but almost beseech you to make sure that your efforts go to the low income, affordable residential rental units being built. This is such a priority. In neighborhoods such as where I live in Roseland, it's not uncommon for 2 to 3 families to live in one house, a typical 2-bedroom house from the past, with a garage that they convert to a living unit, and then they build an addition onto the garage. And you'll have anywhere from 6 to 10 adults plus children living in what we used to consider one single family home. So this is really something that's very important that you could work with the city manager and our elected officials to take the lead on this, on how to resolve these types of problems. Thank you for your time.
It doesn't appear that we have any more public comment on this item.
All right, thank you. Item 6, study session. There are no study sessions today. Item 7, public comments on non-agenda items. We're now taking public comment on non-agenda items.
Yes, sir. I'd like to use the open. Let me see. I'm going to try to zoom. Oh, I'm sorry. The machine
So-
took over on its own.
Should I just go?
And now it won't go back. Here we go. Slowly we'll get there. All right. And I'm trying to get focus. All right. So, let me see right here. I won't take up much more of your time. I have this up here because it shows houses, My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. These are houses that were purchased with taxpayers' money over in the Roseland neighborhood. There's one up here also, 3-bedroom houses, nice houses. People lived in them for long periods of time. And the city decided, certain staff members of the city, that these were going to be surplus. Veterans organizations approached the city and said, why don't you let veterans live in those houses, those 3-bedroom houses? This one here was a 1-bedroom cottage, and use vouchers, HUD-VASH vouchers. Get yourself 10 to 12 veterans off the street, get them into these houses, and have a stewardship of this area nearby, which is going to be a park in the future. Right now, it's a preserve. The city staff ignored us, went ahead and destroyed those housing units, which were paid at market rate to buy them in the first place. So millions of dollars were spent for these houses, 4 houses, which were then destroyed. This is a pattern the city has had for a long time, because I served on the Southwest Santa Rosa redevelopment project area in the year 2000, 2004. And the city destroyed 17 houses to widen Stony Point Road over the objections of the committee, who said build it within the right-of-way. But the Chamber of Commerce was like, well, no, we can widen it. And so they destroyed those houses, which were never replaced. But now 6 of those lots are up as surplus property. And the city has put out an announcement that those 6 lots will be surplus. So I'm here to make a push that you folks tell the city, let's try to get veterans into those 6 surplus lots. Let's see if we can work with nonprofit organizations and get project-based vouchers to be used on those lots, which are at the corner of Sebastopol Road and Stony Point Road, 1 lot down. 6 of them, they're next to each other. Those were single-family homes. I knew the people that lived in them. When they were moved out and destroyed, it destroyed a neighborhood in a sense. But that's gone. We can't change that. What we could do, though, is get ourselves a multi-story building into those same sites and have it house up to maybe 20 or 24 veterans if it was done with prefabricated modular housing techniques, such as the new hotels locally have been. They've been doing that with La Quinta and this hotel downtown right over here. So the opportunities exist. They'll only happen if some kind of recommendation comes from governmental agencies, because elected officials often don't listen to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
No, it doesn't appear we have any more public comments on item 7.
Item 8, approval of minutes. Do any commissioners have any amendments to the minutes? All right, seeing none, we'll take public comment on item 8.1.
It doesn't appear that we have any public comment on item 8.1.
Okay, we will adopt the minutes as submitted. Item 9, chairperson commissioner reports. Do any commissioners have any reports? I thought you were going to make a report on the...
No, that was the committee.
Oh, is that later on? Okay. Oh, committee reports. Okay. So for item 9.1, we do have a motion for the appointment of an ad hoc committee.
So Chair Newton, just to expand on this, it's been our annual practice to have 2 commissioners participate with staff in the review of our NOVA applications. So we are looking for the selection of 2 commissioners who would be available within the next few weeks to review the recommended applications prior to those coming to the Housing Authority's October meeting.
Okay, and go ahead, Commissioner Owen.
Can you go over the applicants?
Give me 1 minute to pull that up, please. in an effort to prevent any conflicts of interest.
That would be correct.
We had 5 applications. The project names, would that be sufficient? If you have additional questions, just let me know. The projects that submitted for this round of the NOFA were Caritas 2, Laurel Perennial Park Phase 3, Ponderosa Village, Stony Point Flats, and West Avenue Apartments.
Can you say that again, please?
All 5 of them.
Yes, please.
Caritas Homes Phase 2, Laurel at Perennial Park Phase 3, Ponderosa Village, Stony Point Flats, and West Avenue Apartments.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I need some guidance here. Are we going to select 2 names now, or is this saying that we just need to select 2 names at some point?
Correct. If you can select 2 commissioners, I think what we've done in prior years is if 2 commissioners volunteer and everyone's in agreement, that would be sufficient.
Okay, would anybody like to volunteer to serve on the, okay, we have 1 from Commissioner Conti and Commissioner Smith. Any others? Okay. Well, that being said, I think we can go ahead and approve Commissioner Conti and Commissioner Smith for the NOFA Ad Hoc Committee.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners on item 9.1? All right, we're taking public comment on item 9.1. Okay. Do we have to do a motion and a second on this, I guess, to make it official? Okay. And there's verbiage on the motion somewhere? Okay. Did they hand that out? I thought she said they did. Anyway. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding item 9.1?
I'll make a motion to approve Commissioner Conti and Commissioner Smith.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman? Commissioner Owen?
Aye.
Commissioner Conti?
Aye.
Vice Chair Downey is absent. And then Chair Newton.
Aye.
So let the record show that this motion passes with 5 ayes.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, committee reports. All right, Commissioner Smith.
I'd just like to report on the 2 housing projects that Commissioner Conti and myself and Rebecca Lane had gone to a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to, first of all, thank her for setting them up. One was over on Range Avenue, and that was a very interesting project. It was built in 2007. There's 107 units, 1 and 2 and 3 bedrooms. We met with the manager and the assistant manager, and it was interesting is both of them live on site, and that was a good thing to have. They gave us a tour of the property. There's 10 separate buildings, but we started in the main building, and turns out that the city of Santa Rosa provides from Monday through Thursday, 3 to 6 p.m., after-school programs for many of the children there, and that was real good. I don't know why Friday was skipped, but excuse me, that was a good thing to hear. The property overall is well-maintained, but they are facing a number of sizable maintenance issues, and we didn't mention that, you know, that's something they may want to look at coming to Housing Authority if they need money. I'm not sure. Burbank Housing is the property manager over there. They are looking to get money, or they have, to get cameras for security, because there's been some break-ins and things like that. The property is open in the back, and people in the neighborhood will come and drop off big pieces of items to be thrown out, and they have no way to stop them from doing that, so they have to take on that responsibility. We did get to look at 2 units that were empty that we're doing some work on. One was a 1-bedroom, and the 1-bedrooms, I believe, are all on the ground floor. And they're good units. They don't provide, they allow air conditioning units that people could buy and bring in, but it's not the one you put into the window. I guess it's a floor model, and you have to vent it out. And that's something the tenant's responsible for. Tenants can also rent their own washer, dryer, or go to the community one. So that was kind of good to know. But they used a third party for that. We did see a 2-bedroom unit, an upstairs, downstairs unit, and that was another good thing to look at. And they said generally there's only a few people coming and going. This year they've had maybe 7 to 9, I believe. It was kind of unusual and everything. I think, I'm just trying to remember. They have a lot of open parking places, and then tenants can rent the garages, and you know, and that's a good option to have. Overall, it was real good to see this project, but they are looking at some sizable maintenance issues. And the one comment they did say that is an issue for the units is hot water. They say you can only do one thing at one time if you need some hot water for your unit. And they kind of laughed about that. Commissioner Conte, you have anything to add?
Just in general, I thought the experience was really valuable, and if we could do more of that, if staff time is available for any of that, that would be great. I felt like it was a good connection with the middle folks, you know, between the funding and the residents, those people, you know, who, to hear from them about their needs and their solutions was really valuable. Thanks.
We then went over to Linda Tunis Senior Center. Just got, I think, opened up last year. Originally was the Scottish Rite Temple on the corner of Highway 12 and Acacia. We met 2 of the managers there, and they gave us a little tour. It's not a big complex, but it was good. We got to go into one of the units. They're all 1-bedroom ground units, and they were built around the inside that faces out. You know, the kitchens are 2 electric burners. They have actually a separate refrigerator, a separate freezer, which was interesting. It's just it was good to get some feedback on these places. The one concern the manager had was something with the city wanting them to potentially install some emergency cord for people that are having a 911 event. She was against it because of the cost to build, the cost to maintain. She'd rather have the people wear those medic alerts rather than building something that is costly to maintain and everything. This being this Scottish Rite Temple, in the inside area, they had this giant ballroom with a commercial kitchen that they haven't got up running yet. They're not sure how to get it going, maybe an insurance thing, but it was good to see. And then they have a smaller room for TV with computers and a printer. So just a nice thing to see. And they also showed us where the Acacia pipeline project they want to build is going to be put. They're going to really just rip down the administration building and put it right next to the existing one right there. And that's down on Acacia Road. Oh, and one other thing on the original project on Range, they got a grant to put in solar panels on all the projects, but when I asked how are you going to apportion the cost, they hadn't figured that one out yet. And it was kind of surprising because the units don't use a lot of electricity and the stoves are still natural gas. So I'm not sure why they went ahead and did that, but I just remembered that and everything. In fact, the existing Acacia Lane 87 unit building has some solar panels, but they only use those for like common areas, you know, so it's not used for the individual units. So it was good to go over there, and both projects have good parking for the tenants and everything. You have any?
I just wanted to clarify on the emergency pools in the bathrooms. That's an initiative through the city of Petaluma through the senior planning for the county. And it's something that she's heard about here and was not fond of the idea. So it's not something that the city of Santa Rosa at this point is pushing.
And one other thing, the really nice thing on that map of all affordable housing, there's a sub-websites for each project. So when I drilled down on the one on Range, that's how I knew there were how many units, and the one for Linda Tunis just brings you to the PEP Housing Authority website. They don't show you what's built there. So that's really nice to see as part of that website. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And yeah, I think those visits are valuable, so I'd definitely like to explore more opportunities to do that in the future. Are there any other questions on the committee reports? Anything else to add? Are there any public comments on item 10?
If you'd like to make comment upon this item, head to the podium nearest you. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any public comment on this item.
Okay, item 11.1, or excuse me, item 11, Executive Director Reports. And for item 11.1, we have the pending development pipeline update.
So Commissioner Newton and members of the Housing Authority, attached is the monthly update to our pipeline. And you'll see that we have a couple changes. We have Aviary Apartments leasing up, which is on the first line of completed projects. We are still working with USA Properties on the lease up of College Creek, which is number one on the funded and under construction. And those would be the noteworthy updates for this month in the pipeline. So before I get to my department update, are there any questions on the pipeline?
Commissioner Smith.
On the funded and under construction, the number of affordable units, you put the dollar amount twice. Did you have a number for the affordable units? You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I do, yep. We'll have to correct that, so
Okay.
we'll push it back out.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Commissioner Conti?
Yeah, the NOFA applications, they're not necessarily on the pipeline list, correct?
That is correct. We usually update the pipeline with our NOFA applicants following the completion of the application review.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from? I have one question kind of going back. Just the AMI, those going back one, the different income levels, affordability levels, those are all based on AMI, right?
Correct. It's based on AMI, and then as we look at individual households, it's based on the household size.
Okay.
And we have a table that is on the city's website under the Housing and Community Services page that breaks down what that means by household size.
Okay. So there's not just a number for AMI. I guess it depends on how many are in the household.
Correct. There's
Things like that, different
yeah.
factors. Okay.
If there aren't any other questions on the pipeline, just quickly for the executive director's update this month, I want to call your attention to the city boards and commissions outreach meeting, which will be held next Tuesday, October 1st from 5 to 6:30 here in the city council chamber. This is an opportunity for anyone who's interested in serving as a board or commissioner on the city's various boards to receive information on what those boards do, how to apply. There'll be liaisons from every city board and commission. And then also to let you all know that we are currently recruiting for the vacancy here on the Housing Authority. So if you know of anyone who is interested in serving on the Housing Authority, they can apply through the city's website. And then any applications that are received will be reviewed and interviewed by City Council. The more applications, the better, in case we have any upcoming vacancies in coming months.
Great. When is that? Is that next Thursday, you said?
Next Tuesday. So
Next
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
October 1st.
Okay, great.
And that's also on the city's website,
Okay, great.
What's the time for that?
5 to 6:30.
Obviously, a good thing, as we all know, serving on a board. A question from Commissioner Conti.
Yes, I have a question about being a resident commissioner. Can you explain a little bit about what the limitations and opportunities are for moving on as a regular commissioner, since the resident commission is just limited to 2 years? Is that a one-time only position?
No, it is not. So there are different term limits, just for the benefit of everyone on the Housing Authority and those listening. We have our general commissioners, and then we have 2 resident commissioner seats. For resident commissioner, it's a 2-year term, and for all other commissioners, it's 4 years. If a tenant commissioner is interested in continuing to serve, they would just need to submit a letter to be considered to continue their seat on the Housing Authority. Anyone, whether they're a tenant or just a resident of the city of Santa Rosa, can apply for any opening on the Housing Authority. So there is the opportunity for us to have more than 2 tenant commissioners on the Housing Authority.
So generally, the request would be made after my term would be finished?
If your term, if we are approaching the end of your term, just reach out to me and we can coordinate on that, but yes, ideally before your term ends.
Right, in another year. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or staff? Yeah. Obviously, serving on a board is a rewarding experience, very educational, and a great way to serve the community. So big plug for that. So appreciate you guys doing that. I think it's very important. Are there any public comments on item 11.1? Okay.
You may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Rosa. I'd like to thank all of you for volunteering to serve on these boards, and it's definitely something that's very important. I wanted to talk about the pipeline here because I noticed that a major project going on with the County of Sonoma, 7 acres on Sebastopol Road, called by them Tierra de Rosas, isn't in this pipeline, but I thought some funding was coming forward from the city in what we know as the Roseland Village Shopping Center project. Also looking at this, for the Southwest, there's 9 projects on here right now through all categories, totaling hundreds upon hundreds of homes, and hundreds of homes have been built out there already, plus the market rate developers are putting in lots of housing, but the infrastructure isn't keeping up. And so now there's all these people in long lines of traffic, a lot of frustration with people who basically had not realized that they were going to be having an urban area brought in to what was once rural. They call it the urban-rural interface, and they're getting run over. The dilemma that we face also is when you bring so many people into an area, you need to have amenities. We had been promised that there'd be a 1 acre green space at the Roseland Village Shopping Center when the county bought it and negotiated through the Agricultural Open Space District. Millions of dollars have been given, but it's not going to be a 1 acre green space, it turns out. It turns out it may be just a half an acre, and there'll be a food court there. And the food court won't be run by somebody from Roseland. So these are the kind of land sharking things that go on, and we're really concerned. We hope that you and your legislative body with the city of Santa Rosa can look in to see if there's any Santa Rosa funds being spent at Tierra de Rosas, the Roseland Village Shopping Center project, and if so, what are the stipulations on how it's going to be spent and what's going to occur there. We were told originally there'd be 100 market rate units coming in first because they needed to pay for the affordable units. Then there'll be 75 affordable. We keep getting a bait and switch from those folks. This has been going on for a long time. I was on the committee that chose Mid-Penn, and the things that they said to us now are different. We were told we'd get a library branch. They're not saying they're going to provide that now. In their latest documents given to the county, they say that they're going to have a 24,000 square foot, civic building, all right? We thought that would be the library. Please, I ask you government officials to help us find out the truth.
Thank you. Are there any other public comment on 11.1?
We don't have any more comments on this item.
Okay, item 12, consent items. When consent items are brought before the Housing Authority, it is not required that staff provide presentations to the commissioners. If there are no objections, with a motion and a second, the Housing Authority commissioners can take a single vote on all consent items on this agenda after public comments. Item 12.1, Megan.
Item 12.1 is a resolution acknowledgement of project completion for Caritas Homes Phase 1, which is a 64-unit rental housing complex located at 347th Street in Santa Rosa. Approval of this resolution will allow the staff to close out the project with HCD for the CDBG DR funding.
Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Owen.
So this is for phase 1?
Correct.
And it's been open for a year, 14 months?
It's been open for approximately a year. Lease up recently completed, and they are looking to convert to permanent financing in November.
And this is the resolution is to release the retention to the general contractor?
Correct.
The
And
last 10%. My question is, why does it take so long for the resolution to show up to release the 10% retention to the general contractor? And the concern is, the longer it takes to pay the general contractor who's had to pay subcontractors just draws out and usually makes projects more expensive. Is there any way we can speed up the process to get this done so that the retention can be paid sooner for a project that's been open, completed, and leased?
Lease-up actually took quite a while. So while the project was completed last year, lease-up just completed a few months ago, and that's due to the working through the population that is occupying the building. So that did take longer than anticipated, but we can certainly endeavor to advance these quicker.
So is part of the process that you have to go through each tenant and make sure they qualify?
Correct. So
Okay. That
yeah,
does
and
take time. Thank
this
you.
one is layered too, in that it's no place like home funding, which requires work with county health to make sure that those tenants are in fact meeting the mental health requirements of that funding source.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? We're now taking public comment on item 12.1.
It doesn't appear we have any comment on this item, public comment on this item.
Okay, would any of the Housing Authority Commissioners like to motion regarding the resolutions for item 12.1 consent items?
I'll move on the resolution.
I'll second.
To be official here, I'd like to make the motion to waive the reading of the text and approve the resolution acknowledgement of project completion for Caritas Homes Phase 1, a 64-unit rental housing project located at 3407th Street in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County, California, APNs 010041001, 015, 016, 014, and 020.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Do everything by the book here. Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Owen and a second from Commissioner Conti. Clerk, please conduct the roll call vote.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman? Commissioner Owen?
Aye.
Commissioner Conti?
Aye.
Vice Chair Downey is absent. And Chair Newton?
Aye.
Let the record reflect that this motion passes with 5 ayes.
Okay, thank you. Item 13, report items. There are no report items on this agenda. Item 14 is adjournment, so we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.